Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Head of Technology Policy and Partnerships, World Economic Forum, Zvika Krieger.
Good afternoon, everyone. So excited to be here with you today. I recently completed my term as the U.S. State Department's first ever representative to Silicon Valley, that foreign country out on the other coast. And part of my job was to brief leaders, senior government officials from around the world on emerging technology trends. And I was really surprised to learn that most of these global leaders don't think about things like artificial intelligence, gene editing, blockchain and digital currencies. They see them as trends that are so far ahead in the future that they can't compete with the pressing policy issues that they have sitting in front of them on their desk every day. Just recently, the US Treasury Secretary said that artificial intelligence is something that's, quote, not on his radar and something that's over 50 to 100 years away. That's a sentiment that actually I heard quite frequently from engaging with leaders from around the world. But the truth is, stuff that we used to think of only in science fiction movies is all around us already and having a huge impact on society. The fourth industrial revolution is here. Technology is fundamentally changing the way we work, the way we relate, our environment, and sometimes what it even means to be human. Just to give you one example, a landmark study came out last month from MIT and Boston University trying to quantify what is the effect of artificial intelligence and automation on our workforce. And they found that for every 1,000 workers, 6 workers per 1 robot lost their jobs, and they saw a decrease in 1% of human salaries. They looked from the period of 1990 to 2007 and saw that 670,000 jobs were lost because of robots, AI, and automation. And that was just until 2007. Think about how far technology has come from them and how far technology is going to go in the future and what impact that can have on our workforce. Tying this back to the conversation that we just had about equity in the workforce, the study found that twice as many men are losing their jobs due to automation as women. Now, there has been a hope that technology is taking away jobs, but it also is creating jobs. However, this study that came out last month showed that the pace of new jobs is not keeping up and is not replacing at the needed rate the jobs that we're losing because of technology. And to the extent that that technology is creating new jobs, it's not creating those jobs in the same places that are losing those jobs, contributing to widening inequality both here and abroad. And this is not just a problem here in the United States. The World Economic Forum, in its Future of Jobs report, predicts that we're going to lose over 5 million jobs across 15 countries, developing and emerging economies around the world. And the World Bank actually just put out a report that said over 2/3 of jobs in the developing world are going to be automated out of existence. 2/3 of jobs. And actually just today, the International Bar Association came out with a report that suggested that employment law might start to think about quotas for how many humans we need to have in a marketplace. So we were talking about the gender pay gap earlier. We maybe start soon talking about the human-robot pay gap in the workforce of the future. So the trend lines are clear. The question is, what are we going to do about it? Governments, private sector, civil society, we all have a role to play in ensuring that the benefits of technology accrue to as wide a spectrum of people across society as possible, particularly the vulnerable and the marginalized. And that's why I left the State Department to join the World Economic Forum and to lead our new Center for the Fourth Industrial Revolution in San Francisco. And we're going to be bringing together top experts together with stakeholders from across sectors around the world to come up with new innovative ways that we can ensure that as many benefits as possible from new technology are felt by as many people around the world. Governments are desperate for guidance on how do they engage and shape the trajectory of these new technologies. private sector is stepping up and taking responsibility for the impact of these new technologies and wants productive ways to be able to contribute to those conversations and to those processes. It's particularly fitting that Mark Benioff is actually going to be, is the inaugural chair of our Center for the Fourth Industrial Revolution in San Francisco, because Salesforce has been such a leader in harnessing new technology to fundamentally change and revolutionize the workplace. We heard today about Einstein and how Salesforce is bringing artificial intelligence to the fingertips of all of its customers. And so this panel that we're going to be having here today is particularly valuable. I'm really excited about the conversation about AI and the future of business, so that all of you can start thinking about how can you bring the benefits of artificial intelligence to all of your customers. So I'd like to hand things over to our great moderator, Alexis Sobel-Fitz, who is an editor from Back Channel, which is one of the most important publications in trying to understand the impact of Fourth Industrial Revolution technology on society. Alexis.
Thank you. So I'm Alexis Sobel-Fitz, and I am a senior editor at Back Channel. And we're here to talk about AI, and specifically how AI is influencing business, which is a topic that we talk about constantly at Back Channel, because Back Channel, we have one singular mission statement, and that is to cover tech as the story of our time. And I think that there is no area that is more prescient to this story and more, and I use this word sparingly, disruptive to our industry than AI. And so luckily we have a fantastic panel here of people who are really intimately acquainted with this issue that I'd love to introduce to you all. So first we have Michael Chewy. Hi, Michael.
Hi. Hello.
And Michael is a partner at the McKinsey Global Institute, McKinsey's business and economics research arm. And there he leads research on the impact of disruptive technologies and innovation on business, the economy, and society. And before joining McKinsey, Michael served as the first chief information officer of the city of Bloomington, Indiana. And while there, he redesigned the enterprise architecture of the city using open source technologies, leading to Bloomington being the first community in the entire world to use both live and archived video streaming of their public meetings on the web.
I'm very old.
And so next to Michael, we have Sarah Arney. And Sarah is a senior manager of data science at Salesforce, where she leads teams building AI-powered applications across the Salesforce platforms. Before Salesforce, she led the healthcare and life science and federal teams at Pivotal. Before that, Sarah received a PhD from Stanford University in biomedical informatics, performing research at the interface of biomedicine and machine learning. Before that, she also co-founded a company offering expert services in informatics to academia and industry. Sarah.
Thanks for having me.
And next to Sarah, we have John Fremont. And John is the AI go-to-market lead for North America at Accenture. And there, he's responsible for driving AI strategy in North America to help Accenture grow their AI footprint. And John joined Accenture in 2015 as part of Accenture Interactive's acquisition of Chaotic Moon, where he was the chief revenue officer and the managing partner. Hi, John.
Yeah, thank you.
So we've been hearing a lot over the last several years about AI, and it's really become just a hot topic. And so I'm hoping you guys can give me some context of how our perception of AI has changed just in the last few years.
I'll start. AI's been around for a long time as a term, right? Over half a century. And, you know, we've had these times when it was on an upswing and these things we called AI winters where it was like, you know, I think one of the interesting things about just the language is somebody said once, We call it AI until it works, and then we call it dishwasher, right? And so for a long time, AI was the thing that was out there that we hadn't done yet. But somehow the convergence now between the term AI and what people actually think is happening now and are excited about now has come together for a bunch of technical reasons. I mean, there's more data, there's more processing power, but really it's starting to actually have real application, and I think that's where some of the excitement comes from in business.
And so one of the things I'm really curious about is that we all know that AI has taken over our personal lives. You can't use any element of technology from Netflix to Spotify to Amazon shopping from your couch without encountering AI. And yet it's been a little bit slower to take on the workplace side. And so, Sarah, do you have any thoughts on this?
Sure. I can actually speak a lot to the experience also prior with customers around what has changed in interacting with them. So I think in general, in Facebook and I guess Amazon and Netflix, we're thinking about recommendations. And that was the accessible use case for most of our customers. And over time, through what we've seen in terms of understanding of what else it could be, I think there's a lot more excitement. So that's sort of the first is the availability of use cases. But with that, I think there's also this need to have a technology shift. And so there's actually a ton of effort that goes into strategy and design and the risk associated with coming up with a way to pay for resources that allow you to bring all those data sources together, deciding what the right use cases are that kind of appeal to the business. And then after that, sort of the operationalization. So, okay, I can build a model and I can learn about my data and about my business, but how do I now drive some low latency automated action? My old boss actually used to say that PowerPoint is where models go to die. And so if you want something to really work, it has to be in operation, it has to be moving. So kind of the challenges around that. And then I guess the last thing really is around sort of the process has to change, how we accept what is coming out of it. And so I think in an enterprise, it's actually very challenging, especially the more established ones, that are not software first from kind of the get-go, from, in some cases, century-old companies.
That's a really interesting framing of the idea. And so within that, I'm wondering what industries and spaces we are seeing just very powerful disruption in AI. And conversely, what industries are being left behind in the AI foot race?
Well, I'll take that. Interestingly, I think it's the ones with real-time data streams that are seeing the most uplift, right? The ones that have done a really good job of setting a plan around their data, right? We have no issues right now with collecting data. I think I heard a statistic, this is probably a year or two ago, but that in the previous 2 years to hearing that, we had collected more data than anything prior in the existence of the human race. That's a lot of data, right? We don't have a data collection problem. We have a data organization problem is what we have. And really the stunting of sort of the advancements, to sort of piggyback on what you are saying, it's really about having a strategic outlook on this and having a all-in decision. The winters are over. We've all decided that the winters are over. And I think it's true, right? We've got the scalability, we've got the compute power, we've got the cloud to be able to do a lot of the things that we never could have even imagined we could do. But now it's about investment in strategy. And there's, like you said, there's a lot of things going on in all these different little silos and these vertical slices of having actually truly advanced pieces of technology doing really interesting things across many, many industries. But I think we've come to a flexion point where organizations, enterprises have to take a dramatic step in saying, Zvika said, the people are saying it's 100 years from now. It's certainly not 100 years from now. And right now, those who, I think there's probably a 5 to 10 year horizon that, that is going to be a really dramatic shift. And the dramatic shift that we're going to see before we start calling them dishwashers is in the next 3 to 5 years. And it's around those who win are the ones who plan appropriately. We have a saying, my team says, what looks like magic to your competitors in 5 years is just your good planning. And it really is. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of money and a lot of effort to sort of get advancements where we're going with AI.
Yeah, and speaking of good planning, The organizations that win are going to be defined by how they respond to the challenges of AI and how they change their organizational structure. And so what are those facets of organizational structure that are really going to determine who wins?
I don't know. No, I mean, you can ask these really provocative questions, right? What does it mean to be CEO of a company with 50,000 employees where 25,000 of them are robots, right?
Sure.
And I think you can ask all those questions. But I think to the previous point about change is hard within organizations. It's unclear to me whether or not AI, just as a technology, is going to radically change all of the challenges that we have within an organization, which is getting people to change the way their practices, their processes, using this set of technologies. And I think there is this this huge gap between those sets of use cases where we can do things now in terms of improving lead generation or identification of the pipeline and all those sorts of things, which some machine learning can do a little better. And then the Westworld style, can you kill a robot and is it murder? There's a big gap between those two things. And I think understanding the business problems you can start to work on now before you have to worry about Skynet taking over. I think it's really important to just understand you can knock down a whole bunch of things using AI now.
So, but isn't that part of it in terms of organizational changes? I think there's probably not a one-fits-all answer is the first. And then the other is to really go in and really empower the people that are going to be served by AI in a way to understand how it can help them. So number one, educate them on potential use cases, and then really build it up. So I think there are still challenges around collecting data, and there are some obvious ways that you can bring them together, but it's not always necessarily possible to serve a result. So we have excellent examples today on how it's possible to do it at the right time when it's going to make a difference. But being able to collect data is not necessarily synonymous with being able to push a result back. So I think it's definitely difficult to say that there will be one solution, but certainly trying to build a strategy, it's going to require kind of IT and business and everybody coming together to understand how to build toward their needs.
That's a great point. And again, the way we describe people come, where I am right now with Accenture, and we're completely technology agnostic. There's no one thing that is defined as one piece of technology says this is AI, and if you don't have adopted this piece of technology, it's really this tapestry of modern intelligent technologies knit together in a strategic fashion that can then uplift and create a knowledge base that is automated, and then start to extrapolate even more findings from there. In our position at Accenture is really to have the human first. How do we augment intelligence? And actually, what I saw here earlier in the keynote was just a great example of augmenting the Salesforce within the Amazon AWS team, right? And how they uplifted the knowledge base to have real-time sort of predictive analytics to say, oh, these are the places that you should focus your attention. It's not taking away from their job, it's actually enhancing their job in a very valuable fashion. So yeah, I completely agree.
Oh, having said I don't know, I'll add a few things that I think I do know. I mean, I think one is just understanding the role of experimentation and how to scale successful experiments that come from AI, and understanding data, right? Our research says less than 1% of the data that gets collected ever gets used for making a decision, right? So being able to manage all of those things I think are incredibly important. But then to this other question that Zvika brought up before, which as much as, I think whether or not AI augments or automates the role of human beings is just a matter of perspective. Because if you're a factory worker or a clerk who's automated by a physical robot or robotic process automation, you feel like you've been automated. But if you're the head of the department or the factory, the factory manager, you say, oh, well, I've been augmented, right? So, it's just a part of a matter of degree. But all that being said, definitely people's activities will be displaced. Our research says that 50% of the activities we pay people to do in the economy could be automated by adapting currently demonstrated technologies. And so we think it'll take decades, but it will happen. And so there is a role for business leaders to try to understand how do we redeploy talent. We think it's important to think about mass redeployment rather than mass unemployment. That's the right problem to solve.
So how do we do that?
It's having a really open borders within your organization. I mean, if you take organization to organization, the bigger you get, the more siloed you get. And it's very difficult. It's very difficult because there's so many political winds blowing this way or that way. And truly, when we're talking about innovation at this scale, and it is here, it is inevitable. Those who adopt this strategy will win, and those who do not will not win. In fact, they'll lose terribly. Because there are huge advancements, but the biggest challenge that I've found is really this sort of cross-tower collaboration. You've got people in the old IT world, you know, sort of owning their little fiefdom, choosing one piece of technology, and then you've got HR choosing another technology, and then you've got sales teams choosing this, and marketing, et cetera. And what you end up doing is painting yourself into a corner. And right now, if you just have to look at the data and the research, and this is not anymore a marketing theme, right? AI is here, and our expectations need to change around what that means. It's not science fiction, it's really just doing a lot of smart planning. But the organizations that really truly start to advance are the ones who create this horizontal understanding across their organization and have buy-in and a meeting of the minds with everybody that says this is the direction we're going. This is what we're going to do with our displaced workers. We're going to invest here to uplift them, or whatever the planning is around that. And it's a really difficult time right now because innovation is hard. It's expensive. It's risky, and people want to be nervous about their own sort of livelihood, and so then making big leaps can be very scary. And so it really is a top-down decision, I think, and organizations need to really just be bold and invest in it, because this is not like a little blip on the radar. This is probably here to stay a pretty long time.
And so, John, that's so interesting looking at this from the humanistic aspect. And one of the things, when AI is described as this scary thing, whether it's in Westworld or the robots taking over our jobs, there are different ways of looking at this. One of the things about displacement is whether those jobs will end up being pay-to-pay equal to the jobs that are lost by AI. And what can managers do? What can we do as we create these systems to ensure that they're also creating a next generation of financially solvable jobs?
Just a couple of things. I mean, one is, if we look back in history, in 1900, 40% of the U.S. workforce was involved in agriculture. Less than 70 years later, less than 2%. We don't have 35% unemployment or what have you. We did find new things for people to do, but it didn't just sort of happen. These were a set of conscious decisions. There was something, I'm not a historian, but I like a little bit of history. There was something called the high school movement, right? I mean, it was a movement to educate people so that they could go from farm to factory. I think there's a question as to what that next thing that has to happen is. And by the way, it wasn't just public policy. Business leaders in factories who ran factories were some of the people who educated some of the people who ended up working in those factories. So there's a role to play for private sector there as well. But I think it's a huge challenge to think, how can we redeploy labor? But we need to. In our research, again, if you look going forward, because of aging, we're about to lose 40% of the sources of our economic growth from the past 50 years, which was more people working. And so we badly need not only all the robots working, but all of the people working too, in order for us to have economic growth, in order for our kids to have better lives than we do. And so it's incumbent upon us to find those new jobs, those new activities for people to do, and make sure they get paid.
Yeah, I want to add to that, because I think you hit the nail on the head, and you described how the education system changed to go from this agriculture mindset to a factory mindset, and we're stuck still in our education system in the factory mindset. And we have to really think about it not only for the ones who are actively and immediately displaced, but the next generation. How can we educate them in a better way? Because the kids today will come into the workplace in a very different environment than what they're being trained for right now. And it's about being the same way we have challenges with our organizations with innovation and being more open-minded and having pools of like really free, open thought. I think It'll be interesting. We're starting to trend into more of a philosophical, sort of conversation here, but everything, AI will impact everything in our lives, right? It's the regulation around it. Our government leaders here in the United States are talking about it, maybe not as, vocal as they need to be, but the changes will be societal in a very large scale. And so I think it is something that we all have to start to dialogue outside of business.
And so speaking of that pipeline, what can our educational institutions do to ensure that this next generation of workers who will have to have fluency with AI in their working lives, how can we ensure that they're prepared?
I mean, we can't lose 50% or 45%. I mean, we can't have the percentage of female graduates in computer science continue to decrease. That's criminal. It's insane. So at least, how can we increase the number of people who are working on the technology itself? I sometimes joke we should teach less calculus and teach more statistics, because when's the last time anyone had to take an integral? Anyone? When's the last time you had to make a decision based on dirty, incomplete data? Breakfast, maybe, right? There are a bunch of basic skills I think we need to continue on, but I think there's a giant challenge as to what the new high school movement will be going forward.
So I actually agree on trying to shift education to include other perspectives, and definitely being also, you touched on kind of diversity, which I think is extremely important. I remember, it's anecdotal and possibly not true, but I heard the story once about how seatbelts were invented, and they were invented by a set of males, and then once they were put in cars, it turns out that there were a lot of injuries to women and children because they just weren't sized correctly. I don't know whether this is true, but it was interesting. It was sort of the perspective that is brought when sort of only one group of individuals is contributing. So I actually think, as important as educating the new sets of generations that are coming in, it is also important to educate the existing workforce as well. So that they can understand how to have AI serve them and their roles and the things that they see that are missing today. With that, though, I think an emphasis definitely, which I think you touched upon as well, is like the ethics around what we're doing. So not to forget that there are always, at least in biomedicine, there's a certain percentage of time that has to be devoted to, what are the ethical things that have to happen when you execute studies. I think the same is true in AI, not just in terms of replacing individuals, but kind of the impact around what it means to get someone very engrossed in a purely digital world and kind of removing them from contact with others and then dehumanizing sort of everything that's going on. So I would argue that's part of the education as well.
Yeah, I think what's interesting, I think as we sort of begin to lessen our dependency on screens, right? The more automated our life becomes, in business and in personal. I think one of the biggest education areas that we could focus on is really around being more human. And that sounds weird, but we have spent a long time, last few decades, having our kids just stare at screens and type away and do these things. And what happens when, let's go flash forward to sort of a Westworld environment where the system is, now we have a general AI that's running everything, right? And it's a broad intelligent system, hyperhuman intelligence, and then we're left looking at each other, going, oh, wow, hey, I don't know how to have a conversation. And it sounds so silly, but really, the young generation of kids have been so dependent on screens, but now that we start to look at how machines can start to do a lot of that stuff, we're not doing all this manual input, and we have to come back to a more human experience. And I really do believe in the education program. It's really about socialization and spending time learning how to converse and be people together, because when this does ultimately sort of converge to a point where it's now just a dishwasher, we are going to be looking at each other, thinking about how can we sort of advance our human sort of existence, and it's going to be a lot of collaboration face-to-face, I think.
And so, John, let's run with that framework here for a minute. We've talked a lot about how businesses need to respond to AI, but on the consumer end of things, how will customer experience change?
Well, I think it's already changing right now quite dramatically. I think one of the biggest things I see brands doing and that are touching consumers, right, is they're expecting it, the old IT world of build it and they'll come, you get the marketing team around it, you get the news out there, and then hopefully everybody will adopt it. We had the app economy where everybody would have to go to take an action, go to iTunes, download it, hopefully they had connectivity, blah, 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 do all this login. Now there's an expectations around consumers that meet me where I am, right? And there's a lot of really interesting companies out there meeting consumers and being that bridge between it. And we're already seeing a lot of it, like you already said, with, we got Amazon and Google and Facebook, investing in AI, and obviously Salesforce. And when we're out in the customer, we have to meet the customer expectations. And once we do that and we create that loyalty, they start to give us more of themselves, right? And have to expect that they're not just you're not just investing in one piece of software anymore. You're investing in sort of a data stream, a real-time data stream with your consumers, wherever they might be. Maybe they're having conversations on Twitter, SMS, or Facebook, or whatever it might be. That is where I think the interesting component is where AI is going to have a really big advancement push, because once we start to meet our customers where they are, we start to get really interesting data.
So I actually think beyond only kind of my experience, so that I will be provided with interesting information or information that's relevant to me, I think what is fascinating, and we saw it today kind of in that app as well, that allows you to face-to-face see an agent, is that we're over time also going to allow those agents to serve you better, but we also have more and more sophisticated audiences that are going to expect kind of smart agents that are working, and not necessarily ones that are bots necessarily, but kind of a mix. And so with that, growth and sophistication, I believe will have to be some adaptation from our side to understanding what our customer wants, in what instances they want things to be fully automated, when do they want that more human touch to what's happening. So while our experiences will be driven on the one side by possibly being in this, in some instances, news bubble that is maybe guiding your direction, we'll have instances where we really want to go back to kind of communities and human interaction, and we'll have to deal with that as well.
So we are almost out of time, but we have time for one more question, which I'm going to pose to the entire panel, which is, what is your one piece of advice that you have to offer about preparing for the intelligent workspace?
Learn about the technology and transform your organization. I cheated, that's two.
One was mine. I guess figure out how it can serve you and your purposes. So ask questions, keep it honest.
I would say make a very concerted effort to go in that direction and start right now and get everybody bought into it. That if it's moving, the train has left the station, and you have to sort of get together and decide that this is inevitable, and we have to plan around it. And that if you don't do that right now, and you think about it a few years from now, you're probably going to be behind.
Well said. So I want to thank everyone on our panel and all of you for being here and joining us today. If you stick around, we have a great panel on workplace development that'll be right here on the stage in about 10 minutes. Thank you.